What does FIRE stand for? Financially independent, retiring early. And it's a very simple, which is not to say easy, concept. Basically, you stop spending so much on stuff. You take the money you would have spent on stuff and you save it. And once you've saved it, you then buy assets with it. Assets are things that pay you, things like property, shares, bonds, index funds. And you keep going like that through your working life. And eventually you reach a point at which the income from your assets is enough to sustain your lifestyle. Let's use an example. We'll talk about Fred. Fred's a software engineer. He graduates from university and gets his first job. And he does not make the mistake that most of us make, which is going out and spending every cent he then earned because he was so excited to finally have an income. Instead, he keeps living like a student, and he keeps going like that, and he manages to save 60% of his income. He keeps that up for 10 years. He takes the money and puts it into an investment property and into some index funds. And then at 30 years old, suddenly the income from his assets is enough to meet his living costs because he hasn't gotten into the habit of spending so much money. At 30, he can choose to stop working. He can retire. Lucky for me, I started when I was 10 years old. My mum taught me the importance of saving and taught me about the power of compounding. And as a result, I saved half of every dollar that I ever got from that age. And then at 19 years old, I had a pretty impressive bank balance. So I showed my mum. I said, "Mum, look what I've saved. I'm going out to buy this car." And my mum said one sentence that changed my life. She said, "Lacey, that could be the deposit on a home." My mind was blown. And a few months later, I was the proud owner of the crappiest tiny apartment you have ever seen. But at 19 years old, that was pretty exciting. A couple of years later, I graduated from university. I didn't extend my living to the income that I had. I was able to save quite a bit of money. And so I bought another property when I arrived. A couple of years later, I bought another property. Then my employer introduced a share scheme. And so I started learning about shares, and I got interested in that. So I started trading in shares as well. And I kept going with property and shares. And so by the time I was 26, I was actually well on my way to financial independence. And that's a point that I reached when I was 31 years old, which was fabulous timing because that's when I had my first child. And I had the luxury of being able to stay at home with her and not have to think about how I was going to earn an income because my assets were paying my living costs. And I was growing increasingly frustrated with my friends who had been making terrible financial decisions, getting into bad debt, paying way too much for things that they really wanted, like cars, and not saving and not investing. And I look back on our school system and realise that we are not getting taught about money at school. Young people, when they reach FIRE, don't actually retire. They're out changing the world. The difference is that their work is not motivated by money. You choose if you work, when, where, how, on what, and perhaps most importantly, with whom you work. You get to choose because you don't need a wage to support your lifestyle. So, I implore you, save and invest